hold music. You want to avoid it, and so do your customers. So say goodbye to hold music and hello to faster, smarter support with Salesforce. Make service more personal and agents more productive using built-in trusted AI. Then watch costs and wait times drop and satisfaction soar. Support customers in a whole new way with Service GPT. Learn how at salesforce.com/servicegpt.
Welcome to the nature-backed podcast of Single Earth. In this series, we are talking with investors about their visions of the new green world. My name is Tarmo Virki, and in this episode I am talking with Madelene Larsson from Giant VC. But first, a message from our sponsor.
Hey there, I'm Merit. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Single Earth, and we are building a nature-backed currency to empower you to fight against climate change and biodiversity loss. Sign up at Single.Earth and be among the first to switch to a truly sustainable, nature-based economy. And don't forget to join the discussion around climate change and biodiversity loss on our Discord channel. Enjoy the show.
Hello, Madelene. Nice to have you on the show.
Hi, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
You're coming from the Giant VC. I mean, is it as big as the name sounds, or how was the company founded?
It's not yet as big, but we are very ambitious. So hopefully at some point we will become a giant. And I guess how we see it is that we want to back the giants of tomorrow, which we see as our portfolio companies. But I guess Giant's mission is to back purpose-driven founders trying to solve the world's really biggest challenges using technology. And we champion entrepreneurs that are creating a more sustainable, equitable, resilient planet. And we do that by investing across three core themes. So climate, health, and what we call inclusive capitalism, where climate is really our biggest bucket or our biggest theme, so to say. And the fund was formed by two former founders, Tommy Stadlen and Cameron McLean. So we're a fairly entrepreneurial place, and we are supported by an experienced advisory board and a global venture partner group. So, for example, the Unity founder, David Helgason, Lord John Brown, the BP CEO turned climate investor, and the former UK Foreign Secretary, David Miliband, just to name a few. And at Giant, we believe that the largest companies of the decade, so the giants of tomorrow, will really be built by these entrepreneurs that are solving the biggest problems. And we firmly believe that you can deliver systemic change and do market-beating financial returns at the same time. So you don't need to sacrifice one over another.
How big are you, or how long are you on the road of finding those giants? How many companies you've invested in, or how big is the fund in total?
So we got started back in 2020. So I guess we've been actively investing for about a year now. So we're coming towards the end of our first fund, and we're currently raising our second fund. But our overall goal is to deploy $1 billion into purpose-led technology in the 2020s. And we're kind of on the path to do that.
Wow, that's a lot actually, $1 billion.
It is a lot. We're very ambitious. We think there's big problems to solve, and we think we need technology to solve it. So we really see the opportunity, and we really think that these companies will make significant change in the world.
You're raising the second fund. Now when we are recording it, it's late May in 2022. Is it a good time to raise a fund?
Excellent question. I think, of course, it was a better environment to raise a fund before we saw kind of the market pullback that we're currently seeing. We're not gonna shy away from that, but we do hope that there is fundamental support for purpose-led technology and climate tech, right? So we are kind of progressing well with our fundraise, and we have amazing support from our current LPs. They're kind of doubling down into our new fund.
That's good to hear. I think that there's probably many of the companies who will be struggling, at least to some extent, going into this, bear market, downturn, market crash, whatever you call it. And I think the climate is something which, at least from the sense of it, should be in a way resilient, because the problem is not going away depending on the business cycles or anything like that.
Yes, I think that's the I think that's the hope. I think we will, the climate tech as a sector will for sure see challenges, just as other sectors will. For example, there's some, in some software side of climate tech, there's for sure some quite punchy revenue multiples out there, right? So we will need to see those come down, and also we will, companies will need to deliver revenue. That's kind of just the fundamental part of it. But there's fundamental support for the sector, right? I think there's a lot of corporates that make very punchy net zero targets, right? There's increasing regulatory pressure, and then of course, due to the Ukraine war, we're seeing a big acceleration towards new energy that's needed, right? I think there's a lot of innovation to come, but it will also have its challenges for sure.
You mentioned this energy topic in general, because the Russia's attack on Ukraine, energy prices have, soared, and Europe has suddenly woken up and start to think that maybe Europe needs some kind of energy independency plan. Do you see this already impacting on the startup sector? Do you already see the maybe energy startups raising money on high valuations, or maybe the kind of emergence of the new wave of the young startups in the energy sector?
I think there's for sure increasing focus on this sector, and I think when kind of investors start to focus on the sector, you also kind of automatically see more startup in the space, and people are coming up with new ideas because they see that the funding is there. So I think both from an investor focused perspective, but also on kind of a national and political level, right? I think nations just need to focus on their kind of energy independence and accelerate their own renewable strategy, right? And I think that's very supportive. But also from a consumer perspective, energy has become very expensive, right? And I think there's no better motivation for a consumer to shift their behavior than cost, right? So I think we're seeing many consumers who's trying to be more energy independent, maybe installing solar panels, for example, where the new technology is actually becoming on par with kind of traditional energy due to the high price increase.
You're a relatively new fund. How many companies do you have in your portfolio already?
So we have around 20 to date. I think it's around 19 or so.
And you said that the climate is probably the biggest focus, or how do they kind of go across the sectors?
Yeah, so climate is over 50% of the fund, and then we have roughly kind of half split in the two other themes. But then within climate, we also invest in quite a broad range of subsectors, if you will, both on the software side, but also on the hardware side. So we invested in anything from a carbon marketplace that's connecting corporates to farmers to use regenerative ag to create carbon sinks in the soils, to water resilience and water risk platforms, to a decentralized marketplace for climate data to fuel innovation, to kind of electrification and EV enablement and those kind of topics. So we work quite broad-based.
I've heard even broader-based explanations on the climate tech investments. Somebody was pitching the idea of a software company which basically, not directly but indirectly, decreases the need for travel as a climate tech startup. Which, you could, but to me it sounded a bit like far-fetched to do it, to look a bit more green than they were kind of in essence were.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think climate tech is quite a hot space at the moment, and there's for sure, a lot of capital following that sector. So you see a fair amount of startups trying to greenify, if you will, or trying to maybe try to be more climate friendly than maybe they are. So I think as investors, you also need quite a robust mental framework on investment.
I think Greenify would be a great startup consultancy.
Yeah, I think in the green space there's a lot of consultancy opportunities for sure. With all the kind of measurement and regulatory pressure coming.
What's your take on the kind of big corporations' net zero targets? Are they something which will change the world, or are they something which enable maybe let's say, capitalist-minded traders to buy up credits and sell them in 2029, and so everybody would be happy?
I think it's an interesting question. I think it's an interesting space. I think in some ways we need to help funnel money where money is maybe best served. And if you take the voluntary carbon markets as an example, it's of course incredibly inefficient and quite broken in many ways. But still, corporates are making big net zero targets, and they will kind of need maybe some help before they can actually really solve the fundamental problems in their supply chains, etc. And it is a good potential for money to be funneled to the right projects, right, with emphasis I think on the right projects. So I think that whole sector is going to see a big push towards stricter requirements on additionality and verification, just to really make kind of the efficiency of funds much higher in that space, because I think it's currently quite low, which I think is not great, right?
Absolutely. The other part of the equation is of course that the essence of carbon offsets. Are they actually something which is used as we did bad, now I'm paid to the church will tell me I wasn't actually bad, or what's the kind of indulgences is the word I was looking for. Are they actually indulgences for the big corporations, or how much of the good happens? Exactly like you were saying, that key fact is that the money is actually funneled to the good projects, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think in reality, it just makes sense. It depends. Sorry, it doesn't make sense. It depends, and you can have a similar argument around kind of ESG frameworks,
absolutely.
Right? Like, what is actually the outcome of some of these things that are being done? Does it actually have an impact, right? Or is it policies, is it processes, or is it just kind of giving money to carbon offsets that actually maybe should not have been created in the first place, right? So I think there's definitely like misuse, if you will, in some of these sectors, but if they're done right, they still have a purpose, right?
Exactly. As you mentioned, the ESG, I do have an impression that the biggest beneficiaries of ESG are the consultancies selling the services to the big corporations. Agreed.
I very much agree with that. I actually sometimes think that it's almost a bit scary, kind of how much capital is going to be funneled into kind of admin and consultants that should actually be used to developing new technology that could actually change things on scale.
Exactly. Going back a little bit to the giant VC in a more detailed way, out of those 19 or 20 investments, are they all Europe based, or are they UK focused, or how is the geography?
So we are transatlantic, so we focus on US and Europe. So far we're approximately 50-50 US, Europe, but we can also more selectively invest outside of those geographies. So for example, Africa has quite a big inclusive thesis, of course. So that's a space that we will very selectively look at, but predominantly it's UK and Europe. And in reality, it probably becomes US, UK, and the Nordics, because that's where we are based, and that's where we are from. I'm Swedish myself.
Absolutely. That does have an impact, of course. But at the same time, looking at the map of Europe or the map of European startup hubs, UK and Nordics are covering quite a lot of it already, much more kind of punching above the weight clearly compared to the rest of the continent. Of course, UK and continent, I mean, that's a long discussion we should not get involved in, right?
That's a good point.
What about the stage? I mean, if you kind of plan or vision investment of billion over the 10 years, then it's probably across stages, I would assume.
Yeah, so we are multi-stage, but we kind of split our pockets in two. So we have a seed fund where we do investment in pre-seed, seed stage. And then we have an early growth fund where we typically look at Series B onwards. So we almost skip Series A little bit. We do kind of invest there from a very opportunistic way.
What's the logic there? Why skipping the Series A?
I think Series A's can be quite challenging from some investors. It's hard to kind of get the strategy to make sense, because especially in this kind of booming market that we have seen at Series A, it often gets quite expensive and the rounds are quite large, but it's not that de-risked, right? You don't have that much more data. In some cases nowadays, you don't even have a product. So if you focus on seed, it doesn't always make sense to kind of do the A.
I understand. Of course, at the same time, of course, if you have invested in seed and you see a good progress, it kind of makes often probably sense to also be involved in the A round.
Yes, of course, we do follow on with our companies, and then once we get to the B round, we then have the kind of the separate early growth fund that could also invest in our winners, so to say.
If you look at the kind of climate tech sector more widely today, where do you see maybe the biggest opportunities now when we are in a bear market?
So I think there's some big opportunities to be had in home electrification and kind of EV enablement. As I mentioned, I think consumers will be pushed to kind of going green, and it will be more affordable of going green than it kind of ever has done before. And I think some of these sectors still has their challenges. Like the EV is projected to become huge, right? And it has huge potential to also decarbonize the world. But things like range anxiety, for example, is still very much real among consumers, and lacking charging infrastructure or financing options is also very much real. But I think this is an area where we are seeing a lot of technology being built now. So I think it's an area that we can see some significant change taking place in more the near term, rather than maybe some of the 10 to 15 year timelines that we look at in maybe other type of climate technology.
And that's also the field where the geopolitics probably have had the most direct impact on the consumer decision making.
Yes, for sure. But I think there's, if you look at home electrification, the future of your house, I think it's quite an interesting topic to look at, because you need to kind of decide how everything is going to go together. If you have a heat pump, if you have an EV, if you have a home charger, if you have solar panels, there's still a lot that needs to happen for all of this to go together. And then of course there's a dependence on government subsidies in some of these sectors, and you need to kind of build the whole solution really for the consumer, and really have the argument that it will be cheaper for them all.
I recently interviewed somebody in this series who said that we are really excited about the heat pumps. Nobody would think that investors would be excited about the heat pumps just a year ago.
Yeah, for sure. No, I agree. Heat pumps are great, right? I think we're seeing a lot of technology, and also on the installer side, which is something that you don't always think about, but there's a lot of consumer demand, but who is actually going to install the heat pumps and solar panels and the EV chargers? There's kind of some ways like a lacking skill level there. So there also needs to be a kind of an education, or you need to find good installers that are reliable, that can do this in a good way.
So that your house would not burn down and so on. The classical small challenges.
Exactly.
Going forward now, from May 2022, some of the most grim forecasters are talking about the years of the uncertainty and the slump only beginning, and so on and so on and so on. What's your view? I mean, you're in the beginning of the raising for the second fund. How do you kind of look at the impact of this macroeconomics for you guys going forward?
Yes, I focus quite a lot on early stage now, right? But my background is more on public markets, and also the IPO markets, which I did over several years. And my view is that it will get very challenging for some startups, right? Like things became quite crazy over the past couple of years, and we are of course starting to see down rounds now. But I think we will see much more of it, and I think we will also see that pressure kind of trickle down, not only to later stage, but also towards the earlier stages, right? So I think I think I still want to be optimistic, right? Because of course that's my job as an investor, and of course there is also a lot of capital that has been raised, right? Especially over the past 6 months or so, some very large funds. So I think the firepower is still there. I just think that investors will maybe be slightly more critical than they have been before. And as a startup, you will need to also deliver faster than some had to do so far.
Is there anything positive we could wrap it up on? I think your kind of mission, what we are talking about in the beginning, was sounding really positive.
Yes, I don't mean to be negative.
Yeah, no. Just the world around us is a little bit more negative than it was, in April when we are recording some episodes.
Yeah, no, of course. So, I would say that I am still, pretty excited about the opportunities in climate tech. And I think there's some real positive momentum being built in that sector specifically, which I think can really, make us take a more rosy approach to the world going forward. But there's a couple of things that's currently happening in climate tech, which I think is really great. So the first one is, of course, availability of climate dedicated capital, as I touched upon before. But also, secondly, I think we're seeing a wave of the very best entrepreneurial talent wants to be purpose driven. They want to solve very real world problems, and they want to spend their time in the right way. And I think we're seeing a huge wave of these founders founding some really excellent companies. And I think that's going to be really exciting to just continue to follow them. And then I think thirdly, consumers are starting to care about climate tech. Consumers in the newer generations care more than the former generation. This will create pressure on corporates to do better and to do more. And then lastly, I think that the climate investment ecosystem is really evolving in very positive ways. There's a lot of climate groups being formed, which creates a really healthy debate around some of these topics, right? But also, inspirations, and it's great forums for both climate founders, but also investors to meet with kind of like-minded peers and feel supportive, which I think can create a real acceleration in climate tech. And of course, there's also groups like I'm part of the Climate Mosaic, for example, where we are targeting to support underrepresented founders, especially in climate tech, which I think is also hugely important. Because, we need to remember that the climate is hard. It's really, really hard. So we will need very diverse minds and diverse backgrounds to really come together and solve this. But I am quite positive that a lot of change will be made, and I think we will see so much exciting innovation in climate going forward.
I absolutely agree with you on most of those points. I think the only one I would challenge a little bit is the one you are making about the consumer shift. Yes, over the last year or years, we've seen the kind of youth becoming much more kind of environmentally conscious and so on. But I think classically in the downturn, people's first worry, also for the young people, first worry will be, their salaries or getting food from the stores and so on. I think probably some of those choices will suffer, I would suggest, depending, of course, on the kind of depth of the downturn and so on.
Yes, I think you're right, but I still think that people choose climate higher up compared to costs than they maybe have done before. So I think it's going to be more on par. And when we see climate solutions being cheaper, I think there is a scenario where we could actually reach the sweet spot for consumers.
Absolutely. I think that's a good point to finish it off.
Okay.
Thanks, Madelene, for the chat today.
Excellent. And maybe if I could just take the opportunity to mention before we go. So any Danish climate tech founders out there, we are currently live with a giant climate prize where we want to back the most ambitious Danish entrepreneurs, and they can win up to 5 million Danish kroners. And we're doing this initiative together with the Danish Sovereign Green Future Funds. And we have a really exciting council of judges that's led of some of the most successful founders of Danish tech companies. like the founder of Pleo, the founder of Gani, the founder of Zendesk. So it's a really great opportunity if you're starting a climate startup in Denmark. So please do apply on giantprize.dk.
And how do you define the Danishness? Do you need to eat this Danish sandwiches or?
The smørrebrød, you mean?
Yes.
You need to enjoy pickled herring to apply. No, jokes aside, you don't need to be based out of Denmark, but either based out of Denmark or a Danish founder.
Okay, good. Thanks. That's clear. Now everybody with a great climate tech startup, go and find yourself a Danish founder and apply for the prize.
Exactly. Looking forward to hearing from everyone.
Yeah, good stuff. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Join us again for the next episode. Thank you for listening. If you like the show, please give us a good rating and leave the feedback in your podcast player so others will find it too. We will be back next week. Turn on to Nature-Backed Podcast.
Welcome to the Candle Power Hour. Come with us backstage behind the scenes of show business spanning over 4 decades and bringing you the experiences that can only be told by the people who were there.
Our guests are from the A-list, the F-list, and everyone in between. Get set for some of the most insane, hilarious, and inspiring stories you will ever hear.
I'm Mercury.
And I'm Diego.
Your hosts for the Candle Power Hour.
Hey, how's it going? You should check out Worship 95, Creating Heaven on Earth. Music to bring you into God's presence and remind you of His promises. Listen on the Autolus app or online at autolus.com/worship95.
Electricast.